What's up, guys? I'm Trey Smith.
And I'm Bailey Smith.
And we are the owners of Recaptured Values. And you are watching Teach It Tuesday.
Hey everybody, happy Teach It Tuesday. Today we are going to be going over a great pattern. And not just any great pattern, our great pattern. This is Recaptured Values' very first PDF pattern for purchase. We have a skirt add-on if you've watched our videos, but that was just an add-on to someone else's pattern. This is our pattern. And so today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to create this. This pattern will actually be available today. Once this video drops, you'll be able to click the link in the description and order it or download it from our Etsy shop for $5. It includes sizes newborn to girls 12. It has 5 different size ranges and it includes the size chart in here on page 3. Has all the instructions in here, all the good information about what you need to get it done. And newborn 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 1 to 5 years, and 6 to 12 years. And it includes the head circumference sizes so that you can make sure that you're using the correct size here. So this is 14 pages and you get the instructions, the good instructions in here. You get all that photo tutorial instructions in here, but this video is just going to serve just in case we can answer a few questions that we may not have answered in here. So make sure you grab this description below. So we're going to get started. This pattern can be done with just a sewing machine, with a regular run-of-the-mill sewing machine that has a stretch stitch option, which is the exact stitch as what we would typically use on a sewing machine. I like to use a serger. You can do the entire thing with a serger, but you may need to use a either a sewing machine to edge stitch this bow piece that we're going to do in a second, or you can use a needle and thread and hand stitch it to close that bow piece shut, or you don't have to close the bow piece shut if it doesn't bother you. It's totally up to you as an optional step. But this whole thing can be done either on a sewing machine or a serger. Okay, so moving on, the last 3 pages of this pattern that you can download digitally onto your computer are the pattern pieces. We have the measurement square here that is exactly 1 inch by 1 inch. And it is the outer edge of the square. All the pattern pieces will be cut on the outer edge to ensure that you're getting the correct measurements. The outermost edge of this dark line, of the colored lines. So when you print your pattern pieces and you cut them out, you will get a bow piece, you will get a middle piece, and you will get a headband piece. And it has 5 different group sizes on here. And a trick that we like to do, so you don't have to keep printing this out 5 different times for all 5 sizes, is you can fold back, as I have done here with this size. Fold it back, make sure you're folding it on the outermost edge, remember, of this dark line. So we're going to be doing the 1 to 5 year size, because that's the size our daughter wears, and we're going to make this to fit her head. So I'm going to fold that back to make sure that I have this pink line, which is the 1 to 5 years. This is a fold line, and it tells you on the pattern piece where the stretch is supposed to go. And this pattern is perfectly designed for thinner knit fabrics. We have a video showing how to do bows, tied wraps with Liverpool or bullet or scuba or neoprene. This one is designed for fabrics such as double brush poly that you have laying around. I know Knit Pop, we've gotten a lot of people to order from Knit Pop. And so if you have a lot of double brush poly from Knit Pop laying around, this is a great time to use it. Especially if you have bummies that you want to make matching bows, this is a great way to get a full bow with a double brush poly fabric. So we've already set the sewing machine and serger. You need the pattern, of course, printed out. You can print this on your home computer, scaled at 100%. Again, just measure that 1 inch square to make sure that it's measuring correctly. You will also need interfacing. This interfacing is Pellin 911FF, which just means fusible, featherweight fusible interfacing. And you will just iron this on, so you'll need an iron and a surface to iron it on. You don't need that much of that. Sometimes they have this in a plastic, like already cut section, but this was actually from Hobby Lobby. We'll talk more about this when we get to that point. Set my pattern pieces out, and it tells you on the pattern piece what you need. So like you'll cut one headband piece on the fold. You need 2 of these cut all the way around, and you need 1 of these on the interfacing, and then you need 1 bow piece, and it tells you the stretch. So our fabric here, I've already got it laid out. The stretch is going this way, and if you're not sure how to tell that, do the good old stretch test here. You'll pull it. Does it stretch more this way or this way? Whichever way it stretches more, that's the way the stretch is going to go. And that's the way that you want to make sure your pattern pieces are laying so that your stretches go in the correct way. Otherwise, this will not fit correctly. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, and this piece of fabric here is a scrap piece of fabric, if you can tell. It's just that's as big as it is. So this can be done with a whole bunch of scrap busters. It's a great scrap buster project. All right. So I've got my bow piece here. That's not going to fit there. So let's just go ahead, follow this over. Make sure your wrinkles are all smoothed out underneath here. And then you're going to put this is the folded edge, and this is the fold line. Put it down about right there. I'm going to use my handy dandy weights that we created from washers from Home Depot. We just, handy dandy rotary cutter. We just wrap these with tape to make them not look like washers stuck together. It just holds the pattern down so that you don't have to worry about it shifting. I'm going to use this piece for the middle. Alright. So then when you open this up, you have your band piece here. Wow. That's your head wrap band piece. Little scrap that we just did. Let's just go ahead. So remember the stretch was going this way. It's important to remember which way the stretch is going. And so this middle piece, it says the stretch needs to go this way. So we want the stretch to go along this way. So I'm going to put this in the corner here. And I'm just going to cut it. Now, and take care not to cut your fingers, of course. Alright, so that's that piece. Set that aside. And then your bow piece. And this one, though it's not super important that you follow the grain line and the stretch on this piece because you are adding interfacing to it, I have found that making sure the stretch is going this way instead of this way just helps keep everything together if you're using a serger. Sewing machine as well, just because when it goes through the feed dogs, it kind of pulls it a little bit and it can make it a little uneven and wavy. So go ahead and cut this out. And this piece you cut all the way around. And then in order to get 2 mirrored pieces, you would just cut on a fold, but you would cut all around. So see, that's not all the way up against the fold line. I'm going to cut all the way around this pattern piece. Alright, so that's all the fabric we need. When you do that, you get 2 bow pieces here, which is exactly what we need. So we have our 2 bow pieces, we have our headband piece, and we have our middle piece. So we're going to scoot those out of the way and then get this bow piece from our interfacing. This interfacing, it's not really going to matter which way it goes. Just use your bow piece to cut a piece out that you can iron onto your bow piece here. Again, just be careful not to cut your fingers. Cut that one a little too big. Let me go ahead and trim it up just a smidge. Alright. So now you have your interfacing. Okay, so once you have your interfacing cut, we're going to go ahead and grab the bow pieces here. And you're going to put one right side up, and you're going to put one wrong side up. And then you're going to grab your interfacing piece here, and your interfacing should have one rough side, little like raised bumpy side, and one smooth side. You're going to want that rough side to go face down onto the wrong side bow piece. And then you're gonna iron this on here with an iron. All right, so I'm just gonna iron this piece down. I hold it on the spot for a minute. The interfacing will come with instructions on how to iron it. What I do is I just iron it. Just be careful not to make sure that your heat is not up too high, and then just make sure that it won't come apart, and you're good to go. Once you iron your interfacing onto this bow piece, you will take it and put them right sides together, like so. And then you will either zigzag stitch with a sewing machine or serge this edge, and this edge completely. And then this bottom edge here, what you're gonna do is find a little marker. Make sure that you're doing this on the interfacing side, and don't press too hard because you will be able to see your marks through the other side. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead and just find the middle by folding this in half so that I find the direct middle here, and I'm gonna mark the middle piece with a little dot. And then I'm just gonna take a ruler and I'm gonna measure a 1/2 inch from this line and make another little dot, and a 1/2 inch from this side and make a little dot. Basically, you're just creating a guide to make sure that you leave this tiny 1 inch opening to flip the bow piece out. We're gonna do this one on the sewing machine since I showed in the pattern how to do it on a serger. So I'll show you how to do it on a sewing machine because most everybody has one of those. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine and, well, I moved it and now it's all jiggly, but that doesn't really matter. Okay, Singer Stylist. I always forget this. 7258 is what I'm using. It has automatic tension, which is the best feature this thing has, I feel. It has 99 different stitch options, and I love this machine. So we're gonna use a zigzag stitch, which on this particular machine is number 3. Set that to number 3. And I like to go ahead and shorten the width of my zigzag to 3.5 by 2 length. And I believe the bow piece is next. So we're gonna use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which if you follow your guidelines on your machine, just make sure that it's lined up with that line there. And I'm gonna go ahead and do a zigzag stitch. I'm gonna back stitch at the very beginning. Make sure that's secure, and I'm gonna go ahead and go right on along the longest side here. I'm gonna back stitch again. All right, so we got one side down. And now let's do the other side. Make sure that your fabric is still laying flat now. And then we're gonna do the other side. Same thing, make sure it's lined up against that seam allowance line. Back stitch, and then go right along. And then on this one that we didn't mark, we're gonna go ahead and close that off. Back stitch. And then our last piece here, we are going to stop at this mark and this mark and leave that middle open. So back stitch when you start, and then make sure you go straight right to that mark and stop and back stitch a little bit. Okay, and then pull it over so that your needle starts on the other mark. If you need to make sure, pull it over and then manually put your needle down to make sure that it's going where you need it to go. You're gonna zigzag stitch, back stitch. Okay. That's another cool little feature. This thing right here cuts off your excess. If you didn't know, now you do. You're just gonna clip all these little pieces. I just throw them on the table and then wipe the table up later. Alright, and so then you're gonna have this line here since we did it. You're gonna clip that so that this opening is really easy and accessible to get into here. That's gonna be on both sides. Alright, and then as you can see, we have this little opening now that we are going to push the rest of the bow piece out. Alright. And then you just kind of wiggle it a little bit. And then you can use a point turner tool, or you can just use your finger just to make sure those points, those corners, are pushed out. Don't forget you have all 4 corners. They may not be perfect on the sewing machine just because it's a little bit harder to make them perfect. So then now you have this opening. That's your bow piece. And then now you have that opening. You can leave that open if you want to because it will be hidden. But what I like to do is go ahead and just tuck in like that to make it uniform like this. And then I will do an edge stitch right there, an 1/8 inch away from the edge with a straight stitch. Just your typical straight stitch, which is number 1 on this one. And I'm just going to click back stitch. Alright. And so that's what that looks like. You can see where I top stitched it or edge stitched it. And then you clip those little ends off and your bow piece is now prepared for the rest of it. And then we're going to move on to what to do next with the middle piece and the headband piece. Okay, so here's the headband piece. We folded it right sides together. This is the stretch this way. And so now we need to do this seam right here. And we're going to be using the sewing machine again, a zigzag stitch. Make sure you switch that. If you top stitch, make sure you switch it back to zigzag. 1/4 seam allowance or a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Back stitch at the very beginning. And a cool trick to make sure that your fabric or your machine doesn't eat your fabric, when you put it down and you set your presser foot down, hold your ends here of your thread tight so that when you go, it kind of prevents the needle from pushing the fabric down. And so then you'll back stitch. And then once you have it going, you can let go of that fabric. And just make sure that your fabrics are lined up here. And that you're still maintaining that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then to the edge, back stitch a little bit. And there you go. And you can clip your ends here. And then also if you want to clean up the seam allowance, you can. It's totally up to you, which cleaning up the seam allowance would just mean you want to trim off the excess. But for this, we're not going to do it. And then we'll do the same thing with this bow middle piece. Make sure that you remember where your stretch is going the most. And so for this one, it looks like our stretch is going the most this way, which is typically the longer side. They're a little bit, one side's a little bit longer than the other, and the longest side is the fold side. So the exact same thing here that you just did with that seam. Start here. Remember to hold your strings tight so that it doesn't push your fabric down, because that's the number one thing that frustrates people with sewing is when they start with the knit fabric, your needle pushes your fabric down. Make sure you're using a ballpoint needle here for knit fabrics, and make sure you're using a good thread. Make sure your machine's clean, but this right here will help a lot. So when you get started, make sure you pull it and you back stitch, of course. Clip this piece here, and then we're just going to fold both of these pieces right side out. And we're going to put that seam in the middle. like so. And flip this out like so, because that's the middle seam there. And you can choose to edge stitch that down too, or top stitch that seam allowance in the back down if you want to, but it's going to be concealed under this, so it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so then you're going to take your middle bow piece here, and then you're going to take your headband, you're going to put your hand through it like this. This is the seam right here, and then I kind of just like to ruche or bunch up this, kind of just create little folds along the seam here so that you get an even gather on the seam. Then you're going to put your bow piece, your middle bow piece here, sorry, middle piece, around, and you're going to put the seam on the outside. So that when we sew it and flip it, the seam will be on the underneath. So you're not going to see that seam anymore. And then you're just going to sandwich this piece here like this. If you need a pin, use a pin here to keep the bunched fabric from getting in the seam. But you pretty much just use a 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and zigzag stitch again. Make sure you're securing that stitch, and when in the instructions when it says secure, that means making sure you're back stitching, or if you're using a serger, tucking in your serger tails, just to make sure that it doesn't unravel. This one right here is probably the most important one to unravel because it's holding everything together. So this one's going to be a little bit more difficult to hold your strings and make sure that this fabric doesn't get crazy. So you may need to pull it just a little bit to get enough. All right. Back stitch. Let go of that thread. Okay. All right, so then that is what that's going to look like. You can clean the seam up a little bit. Just be careful not to cut into the seam, because then it will come unraveled, and then that defeats the purpose. You can clean this one up just a smidge. All right, and then so what you're going to do, since that's now the seam, you are going to flip this piece over, and then this seam here that we just sewed, or that it was just sewn up, we're going to pull that to the back. And you're just going to unfold it, make sure it's all unfolded, and then grab your headband piece here and make sure that the seam from your headband is nicely tucked underneath this middle piece now that you've sewn onto your headband. So that's going to be the back. Now that's the front of the headband with the middle piece right here. All right, so we're done on the sewing machine. The rest of it, we're going to go over to the table to do. Okay, so you have your bow piece here, and you have your middle piece that you put over the middle seam on the headband. You have your bow piece. So what you're going to do is you're going to just pick the longest sides. That's the edge we top stitched there, or edge stitched. So you're going to create equal folds about 1/2 inch apart. And we typically get, I'd say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 fold pieces, and then the end pieces here. And then you're going to, once you get them folded like that, you're going to put it in the middle bow piece here. And you're just going to stuff it through there. And be gentle not to completely mess up your fold pieces here. You can fix them in a minute, but. And then you're just going to spread them out like so. And then you just make sure that all your fold pieces are showing up like you want them to. You just wiggle them around to make sure they go the way you want them to. If you need to create more folds, you can just by manipulating the fabric. If one of your folds goes away, you can just wiggle the fabric to make a fold. And then once you get it to your liking and even, you need to make sure that the middle piece here is on the back, the middle seam of that middle piece. And then you're going to make sure that there's no folded up pieces underneath your middle piece here. And then you're going to make sure that your headband seam is in the middle underneath the middle bow piece. So you're just double checking to make sure that it's all in the middle. I pulled that one a little too much there, and you just pull it to make sure that it goes in the middle. All right, that looks pretty good. And then once you get it to your desired fluff, I guess you could call it, pull on this, make sure everything is good. Once you get this the way you want it to go, then you can secure this bow piece. And also a cool part about this is you can determine how much of this you can ruche this up a little bit if you want this to be kind of ruched like this. And you want your bow piece to be more fluffy, you could do that. That resembles more of a tied bow. If you want to do that, just make sure that all your seams are on the back and that your headband seam is underneath that. And then of course you will grab, and this is what it looks like when you're done. Here is the finished bow there. And you can stop here if you want to, but I recommend that you secure this bow piece of thread here. I'm going to thread my needle. Threading my needle here. And so we've created a knot here. The knot is going to make sure that the thread doesn't come through the bow, and so we're going to start on the back side of the bow so that the end of the thread is going to be on the back side. I like to start on a corner. When I push it through, be careful not to stab your fingers first of all. And when you push it through, you're going to want to push it through as close to this edge as possible to prevent the pulling marks from the thread. And then when you go back through, you're going to want it to go almost exactly where it came out. Not exactly, because it will come back through if you get it exactly, but you want it to go back through the fabric fairly close to where it came out, so that when you pull it, well, there is no evidence really other than that little pull mark that it went through. You're going to keep doing that, and then I like to just go over here, do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go fairly close to where it came out the first time, and then I'm just going to pull it through. All right, and you can do this about, I'd say 6 or 7 times, or 4 or 5, whatever, however many times you think that you need to secure this. And all the while you're doing that, make sure that your bow pieces aren't getting messed up, because once they're sewn in there, you kind of secured them. So just keep on going around as desired. I'd say you at least need it 4 good points, just to make sure that the little one can't yank the bow piece out. Okay, and then what I like to do is I just like to kind of go back through the fabric here on the back side, create a loop here, and pull my needle through a few times, and then pull it tight, and you will knot it off there. If you're not certain that that's going to be a knot, I like to do it one more time just to be sure, and then we'll do it one more time. All right, and then you will just grab your snippers Don't cut all the way to the knot because it's very easy to clip that knot. Flip it up. You do still have some wiggle room. But then there's your bow piece. That is how you make a Recaptured Values bow wrap. And we guys hope you love this video. Tag us in this. We would love to see what you guys are making with our pattern. I think we put in there to tag it with Recaptured Values patterns. You can also tag Teach It Tuesday, of course. This video or this pattern will be available on our Etsy shop. The link will be in our description, so check that out. It's $5. And hope you guys love our pattern, and we'll see you guys next Teach It Tuesday. Bye.